This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
2, 1. Okay, Baruch Hashem, this is sort of a conclusion of our trip, but I don't think we could have had more of a storybook ending to the trip. As you know, today is a very special day for me personally, and my family has a very, very special kesher with the Malbim. He's kamat, like a mishpach. If you know my Zayda, I'm sure that in the zchus of my grandfather, I'm zoichet to be in this spot. My grandfather, his whole life, mentioned, Rabbi Yisrael Salanter said the same way Moshe Rabbeinu had to be buried outside of Baal Pa'ar, because Moshe somehow had to be a guardian over those neshamas that were nichshel b'Baal Pa'ar. Rabbi Yisrael said that when the Malbim was buried here, he had to be here, and now we know, after the fact that there's so many thousands of Kedoshim buried here, somehow the Malbim is the guardian, if we could say such a thing. So the Malbim was born in 1809, he lived till 1879. The Malbim lived somewhat of a tragic life. He was born in Volnia, he was known as the Eloi of Volnia. His father taught him, but his father passed away, and then he learned by his Zayda, Rabbi. He went to learn in Warsaw, and interestingly, if you look in the writings of the Malbim clearly had studied many disciplines, science, history, and in my grandfather's personal notes on the Malbim, especially in Michel, has many psychological and insights into the human psyche. The Malbim had a very, very wide range understanding of many, many disciplines. And just to mention some of it, the Rabbanos of the Malbim, 1838 to 1845, he's the rabbi in Russian. Until from 1845 to 1859, he was in Kempen. He was known as the Kempen Maggid. 1859, the Malbim became the chief rabbi of Bucharest in Romania. But in Romania, again, there were a lot of influences of more of a modern approach, and the Malbim clashed with these what are known as Austrian citizens who wanted to make certain changes in the style of reform. And the Malbim was very adamant that no changes could be made to the Nusach HaTfilah, to the Negunim, to the style of the shul, to the point where the rich in Bucharest tattled on the Malbim, and he was about to be put in jail, and if not for the interference of Moses Montefiore, the Malbim would have been imprisoned. So he went to try to defend himself to Turkey in Constantinople, to no avail. Where did he go for 6 months? Paris. The Malbim was in Paris for 6 months. He then came to the city of Linschitz, and I'm very proud to say my grandfather's grandfather was the Rav of the city when the Malbim took refuge in the city of Linschitz in the 1860s, and that's when he had the menucha to write much of the Malbim. We're going to see in a moment what years the Malbim was written. So he comes to Linschitz, and then he needs a job. He goes to Königsberg. He becomes the chief rabbi of Königsberg. But again, he's at odds with the Balabatim. The Malbim comes to Vilna. He was going to be hired in Vilna in 1879, but they wouldn't appoint him. The mayor of the city did not want. He was a political criminal. The Malbim had been accused in many cities as being not being able to be a service to community, because the Malbim insisted on absolute adherence to the traditions of halacha. So it says on the other side of the Kever here that the Malbim had a chaloim, because when he was in Königsberg, finally he had a little bit of menucha, and in 1879 he was offered the Rabbanos in Kremenchuk, and then they said, what are you going for? Finally you have menucha, why are you going to Kremenchuk? And he said he had a dream that he has to go to a city that starts with a kuf, because he's going to pass away and he's going to be buried there. And the Malbim headed out to Kremenchuk, but little did the Malbim know that what the Chaloi meant, that he would be buried in the city of Kiev. That was the kuf in this story. So the Malbim began publishing in 1845 on Megillas Esther, and he published until the year 1876. One of the most important principles of the Malbim is, unlike other Mefarshim who learn, there are something called Shemos Nerdafim, which means synonyms. Chazak ve'emat. Some Achronim say it means the same thing. There are many words, there are many what is called Shemos Nerdafim in the Chumash. Tira, Techas. So some Mefarshim learn it's stylistic, but it means the same thing. And one of the essential principles of the Malbim is that there are no Shemos Nerdafim in Lashon HaKodesh. Every word has a nuance of meaning. Now, the Rabbi Yaakov Tzvi Mecklenburg, the author of the Ksava HaKabbalah, advanced the principle, and that every drush of Chazal is based on the fact that the Chachamim are sensitive to the nuance of grammar, and when there's any alteration in the way a pasuk should be worded in the syntax of the pasuk, that is a signal to Chazal to darshan. And therefore the Malbim came up with 613 rules of grammar, which a pasuk must follow, and if it doesn't, that is an indication that the Chazal could make a drasha. I once saw the Chafetz Chaim writes to his commentary to Torah's Kayanim, we, says the Chafetz Chaim, are not on the madrega to understand the mechanism of a drasha. You need to be a gadol, like the Malbim, to understand it. So in the eyes of the Chafetz Chaim, who's a gadol? The Malbim. That's high praise. And as we mentioned, the Briskers say that there are three Achronim that have the status of a Rishon, the Koyach HaChidush of Rishon, the Malbim is one of them. And the Beis Halevi writes, there's a pasuk in Tehillim that none of the Rishonim even were able to explain, only the Malbim could explain it, Beruach HaKodesh. So he wrote the Artzos HaChaim and Shulchan Aruch HaRachaim. He wrote Artzos HaShalom, which are drashos. He wrote a commentary on Chumash called HaTorah VaMitzvah, a commentary on Nevi'im called Mikroi Kodesh. He wrote drashos Al Pidrush Eretz Chemda. I want to tell you over one amazing perush of the Malbim and then a Chidush. The pasuk says that when Aaron lit the menorah in Parsha V'Haloischa, Vayas Kain Aharon. What does Rashi say? Malamed Shivchai Shal Aaron Shaloi Shina. We see the great praise of Aaron that he didn't deviate, and all the Mefarshim are bothered. You see the great praise of Aaron that he didn't deviate? If God told him to light the menorah, he's going to light the menorah. What else is he going to do? Well, why is this great praise of Aaron that he didn't deviate? So the Malbim says, Mamish Dvarim Ha'imdim Berumah Shalaylam. When Rebbeinu Shem created the world, Vayomer Elokim Nasa Adam, Vayihi Chein. Vayomer Elokim Yihi Rakia, Vayihi Chein. Vayomer Elokim Yishutzu Hamayim, Vayihi Chein. Vayomer Elokim Tache Arz Desha, Vayihi Chein. Rebbeinu Shem said, and it was so. It was exactly what the Rebbeinu Shem said. Vayomer Elokim Yihi Ar. Doesn't say Vayihi Chein. Vayomer Elokim Yihi Ar, Vayihi Ar. What happened? Why wasn't it Cain? Because Rebbeinu Shem wanted to create the brilliant light, the Ar Haganos, the light, the primordial light, but he realized that it would not be appropriate for the Risham to be nana from it, so it wasn't Vayihi Chain. The light wasn't the way the Rebbeinu Shem wanted it to be, but it was Vayihi Or, it was just light, but it wasn't the original light. The original light had to be put away, so it wasn't Vayihi Chain. But then Aaron HaKohen came and he lit the menorah. And when he lit the menorah, Aaron HaKohen brought out the original light, Misheshis Imei Abreshis. So Vayas Kain, Aaron made Vayomer Elokim Yihi Or, Vayihi Chain. Malamed Shivchai Shal Aaron Shaloi Shina, says the Malbim. That's Pshat. Aaron wasn't Meshane from the original Kavana of Brias HaOlam, says the Heilige Malbim. So I like to say that if you ask most Yidden, how many seeds are in a Rimain? 613, right? Who says that? Where does it say that? It says that in the Gemara? It doesn't say in the Gemara. It says that in the Medrash? There's no Medrash that says that. Who says that? I even counted a few times. I got different numbers. I did a couple experiments. So Malbim says it in two places, Parshas Tetzaveh and in Shir Hashirim, by Pamoin Verimain. So I always like to say, when the Malbim passed away on Rosh Hashanah, so we make a little yahrzeit Suda for the Malbim. What's the yahrzeit Suda? We take out the Rimain, and we say the Rimain has 613 seeds, and that's the token, that's the yahrzeit Suda to the Malbim. That's the Torah of the Malbim. The Malbim was the one who's Mechadesh, that there's a source, there's a makar that the Rimain has 613 seeds. So it's a simcha for me to be here personally, and I wish my Zayda could be here. My Zayda, Zol Gesundsein, is Mamish a Talmud Muvak of the Malbim. In fact, his initials are Harav Zikni, Meir V'Zikni, Mard Chaleb Ben Yosef Menachem, La'irach Yamim Meshanim. So we hope that the Malbim, who's the guardian of these Kedoshim in this area, should be the guardian over all of Klal Yisrael, and all those who come to be mispal on this holy makom. Our tefillah should be miskabel baracham and v'ratzon.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.